What up? The Skeleton Disco build is really popping off in the endgame. It's super tanky, the map clear is good, and the boss damage is hilarious. In our last video, we talked about doing the campaign on this character. It was awesome. You should definitely try it. It just steamrolled over everything. And the endgame transition was even better than we expected. Once again, this build has just completely exceeded all expectations. Alright, so let's get into a breakdown of this build at endgame, but before we do, help us out with that YouTube busy work, like, subscribe, and hype the video if you're on mobile. These all tell YouTube to show our content to more people so we can keep doing this. We have also been streaming a bunch on Twitch lately. We're trying to hit partner over there, so help us out with a follow and, tune in when we are streaming. Alright, now let's talk about the updates we've made to the build. So this build is still using mostly the same playstyle as it was in the campaign, except now we have a bunch of Spectres covering the screen and spark projectiles. So let's talk about the Spectre that we're using here. It is the Powered Zealot from the Etched Ravine Zone in Intermission 3. That's this zone right here, the next to last area of the current state of the campaign. This Spectre will absolutely flood the screen with spark projectiles and just kind of kill everything that moves. Alright, so for the sake of visual clarity, we've unsummoned everything except for these Powered Zealots, and now we're just going to kind of cruise through here and let them do what they do, and you can see, right, the visual clarity is a 0. It doesn't matter. They're nuking everything. It's totally fine. So the one issue with getting these Powered Zealots with a Bind Spectre is that there are 3 different flavors of Zealots in this area that you can summon. Ultimately, the way that you're able to get them is you just sock it in a Bind Spectre gem, come out here, find the Zealot that you're looking for, summon it up, and then you have to check the skill tab and look, and like I said, there are 3 options. There's one that attacks with a dagger, one that attacks with a staff, and then one that's a spellcaster, and you can tell that you've gotten the right one if you check their menu and see if the skill Spark is in there, then it's good. If Spark is not in there, then you've grabbed the wrong guy. You only need to grab one. They're bind on account, so there's no need to grab more than one, and then there you go. You just summon up as many as you can afford, and you're ready to start blasting. So in terms of the skills that we're using to clear areas, clear out maps, clear out bosses even, we're still using the same set, right? Razan's Trap is kind of our main clearing skill. We throw that down, and it covers a lot of area, as you can see, and it just clears stuff out. The thing that's nice about this is that because it comes from an ascendancy, it automatically levels up. You don't have to spend currency on skill gems and stuff. And for like Scylla Self-Found or like early league, if you're poor, when you hit 90, it'll automatically go up to 6 sockets. The downside of this is that means, like if you're trying to twink a character out, you can't have more than like 2 support gems for this at the start of the campaign, but it is what it is. Ultimately, by the time you get 6 sockets with this, you're going to be blasting everything. Getting that magnified area in there really does help a lot with this one. The Razan's Trap really needs that extra area to cover everything with those fire tornadoes that it makes. Then the other skills that we're using, Kalari's Brutality and Kalari's Deception. Kalari's Deception is our main damage dealer. That's why it's on right click, and it's our main source of damage for bossing and for killing rares. We're clearing just kind of packs of stuff with Razan's Trap, and then just passive damage from all of our minions. And then occasionally throwing out Kalari's Brutality, which the main reason for this skill, the main purpose for the Brutality really is just to apply a bunch of crit weakness debuffs to make the rest of our damage have a much higher crit chance. The actual source of damage really is the Kalari's Deception, and it has this double firing component to it, and this is really like the thing that we can kind of optimize for in our rotation, especially on bosses. Like when you go to fight a boss, you can precast the Razan's Trap before they spawn, and then because we are using elemental weakness, we are using a curse to increase our damage. You can throw that down just like very slightly before they spawn so that it will, pop and curse them right as they're attackable. So the rotation usually looks like throw down the trap at any point, 5 seconds before the boss is out, half a second before the boss is out, Ellie weak, and then throw down 2 Kalari's Brutality to get as much crit weakness on the boss as possible, and then double tap it with Kalari's Deception. But that's the key here. We're doing double taps on any cast of Kalari's Deception because it leaves behind this little ghost form of Kalari that'll do an extra hit that does like a bunch more damage, but with the amount of cast speed and cooldown recovery that we have for our minions, we're only ever able to get double hits. It may not even be possible to get triple hits. I really haven't spent a bunch of time like trying to play with stats to get triple hits, and we don't need to. As you can see from the boss damage so far, you can only do so much damage to bosses anyway before they're dead. but you can see like there's a pretty easy window on casting it twice to get a double hit. And getting a triple hit is just not possible, even if I were to let it sit here and recharge all the way up and just triple cast in one spot, or, you know, right around, just so there's like some visual clarity. We're only ever getting double hits. Because of that, and because we're balancing out like 3 different cooldowns between Razan's Trap, Kalari's Brutality, and Kalari's Deception, we're just trying to keep the trap down anytime we're fighting a boss. Double tap them with Brutality for as much crit weakness as possible, double tap them with Deception so we can get that double hit on the second hit, and then roll in more Brutality and Trap while we're waiting for Deception to come back off cooldown. These cooldowns are all pretty short, you know, they're like less than 3 seconds, just with like very basic gearing. And getting any regular cooldown reduction for ourselves won't do anything to reduce our cooldown either. They're only scaled with Minion cooldown, which is a very rare stat, so ultimately it just winds up being fine, right? Like, you just kind of bounce between your different skills, but the main thing is holding off on Kalari's Deception so that you can double tap with that whenever possible, so you get those nice double explosions. Now, one of the nice things about being Spectre-oriented, you know, having all these powered zealots filling the area with sparks, is that they're totally passive. You don't have to do anything to maximize their damage, I mean, other than, like, put in support gems for them. And so, on that note, we are using wild shards to make them have a pretty high chance of just, like, completely filling the area with spark projectiles. We're still using muster on them just like we are on every single minion except for the cleric, which does no damage because 7% more damage per type of minion. We are using 9 different types of reviving minions, so 63% more damage for the whole build is insane. Feeding Frenzy, 30% more damage, of course. Pierce 3, so that those sparks pierce and just keep piercing permanently. And then the last support gem for the Spectre is the one that's a little, like, optional. So you have Minion Mastery, which will make them do more single target damage, more boss damage, especially against bosses that are up against a wall. The sparks will kind of ping pong back and forth between the boss and the wall and just absolutely crank their health bar. The alternative you can use for faster clearing is Projectile Acceleration 2. Now, the reason you want to use Projectile Acceleration 2 instead of Projectile Acceleration 3 is really, like, not obvious, but it's important. So with these powered zealots, they have a minus 30% projectile speed modifier, and the projectile acceleration supports both give 40% more projectile speed, but projectile acceleration 3 also gives you increases and reductions to projectile speed applied to projectile damage with supported skills. And so if we put that in, it is now at minus 2% projectile speed, which means it is a minus 2% damage modifier, which is worse than nothing. So we are better off running Projectile Acceleration 2, which just has the more proj speed and nothing else. So that's only for proj speed on the sparks, which is useful, but you can get like more single target damage in optimal situations out of Minion Mastery. A little bit more tankiness, not a huge amount, not so much that you really need it, but yeah, having played around with both, the difference didn't actually feel that huge, but it does feel more worth it probably to play around with the Minion Mastery just because, you know, a bit more generally useful in our experience. Then the only other skill that we've really added in here that is of significant, like, impact is Elemental Weakness, and we are only using this on bosses. It has a huge mana cost to it, and just to cover on all the things that we're using with it, it does need to be like level 18 or 19 in order to actually hit bosses. We've gone with 19. Doesn't need to be 20. None of the skill gems need to be 20 either for all of your minions. It doesn't hurt, obviously, to level them up more, but it's not mandatory. A lot of these don't really need to be 6-socket either, like the Cleric. We are using Brutus's Brain on the Cleric. That didn't need to be 6-socketed, but it's cool that it is. But we're using Heightened Curse, Prolonged Duration, and Efficiency, kind of a standard setup for a curse so that they last a really long time and cost way less. You know, the 266 mana versus the 440 without Efficiency. And then we're doing Focus Curse so that they erupt a little faster. Not mandatory, right? You could just take this out and just cast a little sooner. We did play around with Curse Ground and ultimately opted out of that because bosses move around and then it's really annoying to recast. And then Magnified Area, kind of the same thing. Like, if you just don't miss the boss, you don't really need it. Those do add up to jacking up the mana cost, but these are kind of there for, like, convenience, making it so that you don't miss, or if a boss has some sort of phase where they go immune and you have to recast on them, it's just easier to make sure you hit them. All right, now hitting on the support gems that we've added into Razan and Kalari, mostly everything is still the same setup. The things that we've added in are Kurgl's Leash for Kalari, because it is just a huge damage increase. You know, getting Unholy Might, it's 30% damage as extra chaos. We do get 10% of physical as extra chaos as well out of our tree, and Kalari does all physical damage, so like 40% of your damage coming in is chaos. We also get a bunch of withered stacks applied from Right Hand of Darkness, this bonus right here. So we just get a lot of extra damage out of Kurgul's Leash being applied to our main damage thing, and then, you know, we also have Heft because we are scaling chaos as extra, so anything we can do to scale up our physical damage with Kalari does a lot to make that damage even larger. And then for Razan, we're doing Long Fuse because it gives you 35% more damage. It applies to your traps and your brand. We're not really using the brand. Played around with it some. It's probably good, but it's an extra keybind. It's easier to just throw the trap down and just kind of let the minions take care of the rest. So that's ultimately it for all of the skills. You know, pretty much everything else is like the same that we had set it up before, really, with the only exception being the Cleric, which definitely didn't need to be 6-linked, and kind of fills in as you're like, you know, you're trying to just use one of every minion and then use as many Spectres as you can on top of that. Like, you don't have to have 400 plus Spirit, but it ain't bad. And then any leftover Spirit that you have, you can throw into either Clerics or maybe Warriors, depending on exactly how much you have left over. If you have some room for Warriors, that's okay too, but Clerics are kind of the best because they keep everybody else alive. Not you, but the rest of your team. Alright, now let's move over to talking about the passive tree. So we're sticking with pretty much the same setup that we had initially intended, with just a couple of tweaks. One of those being that we've actually dropped Ingenuity just because of not needing it. But, you know, it's an option that you can take, right? So we are getting some mana regen out of some things like Insightfulness and Calibration, some of the small passives on the way up to it, and then also using a Lavinia's Spirits. So we're really not needing to, like, flask at all, and we're never having to think about mana, which is awesome as a caster to never think about mana at all. And then other than that, you know, one of the things that we've kind of learned about minion builds is that they're cookie cutter's not the right word, but like there's definitely like a limited number of options for things you can do. There's definitely more room to play around with minions than what we've done here. We've kind of gone with like a standard setup, but it works really, really well. That's why it's the standard setup. Yeah, you know, you just have so many good bonuses, things that scale your area of effect and cooldown recovery, like Growing Swarm, and some of these bonuses up here with the command skills and cooldown recovery for the command skills, and like at your command, along with the way that muster works, you just get so much damage. You get like a 90% increased damage for your command skills and 63% more damage for your command skills on top of everything else. It's just insane how much damage scaling you're able to get on all of your different minions. You know, 10% Fizz is extra chaos, you're getting withered on hit out of all your minions, and more increased area. Just, it's really, really good. The couple of things that we have kind of tweaked a little bit are making sure that we take Profane Commander sooner rather than later. That 4% increased Spirit's actually pretty big when you're running like over 300 Spirit. That does add up to a bit. You know, an extra minion or whatever. And then also the increased Presence AoE is just really good, especially if you don't manage to get that from a Scepter, which we didn't. Getting Presence scaling is good for like Scepter bonuses, and then at your command also, like more consistently having all your minions inside of your presence so that they're affecting that bonus is really good. Getting Lord of Horrors early is also like really valuable. You know, that combination of Lord of Horrors and Profane Commander and any spirit you have from gear really adds up to a lot more Spectres or whatever minions you're trying to summon. Also, you know, Energy Shield. Is this our first Chaos Inoculation build? Maybe. One of our first anyway, certainly our first of this league. And Chaos Inoculation is awesome, like just all of the possible energy shield scaling, even just some of the quality of life, like taking Hallowed along with 13,000 energy shield, you just basically never get stunned. And your ailment threshold is enormous. You can stand in ignited ground for like a long period of time before you start to build up an ignite, which feels great. It's just super easy to scale energy shield in the current state of the game. And then that combination of Disciple of Varashta giving you -1 second on the energy shield recharge delay, along with a bunch of energy shield recharge rate and faster start of energy shield recharge bonuses around the tree, just really, really makes you super duper tanky. The one thing we could maybe flip out of is, instead of taking the Living Death wheel, the resistance for minions, which are good, right? Your minions do no damage if they're dead, and they do 100% damage if they're alive. But we could maybe drop this and just take something more defensively oriented, like Refocus, like, get a bunch more ES recharge rate, or, just one of these other defensive bonuses. Honestly, just like some of these small energy shield passives. You don't want to take heavy buffer, you don't want any damage penetrating your energy shield as chaos inoculation, but pretty much all the other flat energy shield bonuses we could take. Faster start of energy shield recharge wouldn't be bad. Anything like that, instead of like worrying about your minions like living a little bit more often in maps with damage as extra fire or whatever, wouldn't be a bad trade. But having played around with this and played around with some of these other defensive bonuses, the difference just didn't feel that huge. All right, now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about gear. And so the main things that you're going to want to really like put an emphasis on gear-wise are there's like jewelry, amulet, rings, belt, and then like weapon and focus. And so let's talk a little bit about how to craft all of these. So you can't just buy them. Obviously, like that's the easiest step, and it'll probably wind up being cheaper if you're really going for something nice. Maybe not, but usually it'll wind up being cheaper. So the easiest way to craft a really good Rattling Scepter is just to buy a magic Rattling Scepter with +4 level of minion skills that isn't corrupted. That last part's important. And then hit it with a Greater Essence of Command. That'll guarantee that you get that increased damage for nearby allies. You can see this one has been crafted that exact way. And then to get increased spirit, you pretty much just have to desecrate, and you can guarantee desecrated prefix with Sinistral Necromancy. And then hope you unveil it. You can try using Omen of Abyssal Echoes to get 2 shots at unveiling, increased spirit. And then you're kind of just like close your eyes and exalt on the rest of the mods and hope that they're good. It's not the most effective way. You're going to have to craft a few of them probably to get that increased spirit, but there's not a crazy amount of scepter prefixes available, so like the odds of getting it aren't too bad. But like that's the most easy way to just craft a pretty decent scepter, or you can just buy one. I think if we just like look at the price of one with those 3 mods, spirit, damage, minion skills, 10 to 30 divines, not cheap, but that is like a very high level in-game weapon that's going to be like letting you nuke all content in the game. For crafting a good focus, it's a little bit more painful, but also like kind of easier, if that makes sense. Basically, you just want to start with a really good energy shield focus, just good energy shield prefixes, 300 plus, and then if it has good suffixes too, that's awesome. And then you just buy it. You want them to not be desecrated already, and then you use an Omen of Dextral Necromancy and desecrate it. Hope you don't hit any of the good suffixes that you were trying to keep, as in the case of this one right here. And then you just have to unveil level of minion skills. That's the only way that modifier exists. It is an unveiled modifier from Amanumu, but you can't use Omen of the Sovereign or whatever, Omen of the Liege, to guarantee Amanumu modifiers on a focus, unfortunately. That's the only way you get +2 on a focus, but yeah, it's worth it. And if you get +1, that's actually the same mod, so you can use Divines to just roll it over to +2, and that works. So for the amulet, again, pretty simple. You start with a magic amulet that has +3 level of minion skills, and you like the implicit on, it's not corrupted, and then you just roll it up with like resistance essences. And then you want to put like global defenses amulet prefix, and you want to desecrate a prefix, again using omens, and just try to hit spirit. And that's kind of it. You close your eyes and exalt if you want, or maybe use Omens of Catalyzing Exaltation and close your eyes and exalt if you want to try and get good modifiers on there. This isn't the best one I crafted. I crafted something like 15 or 20 of these, and most of them were bad. Most of them had not sold, but one of them had like a ton of rarity on it, and then also like 48 spirit or something, 50 spirit and global defenses, and +3 minion skills, and that one was worth like 80 divines or something. So, there's some real big profits to be had from crafting minion gear, but you do kind of have to commit to crafting a bunch because most of it's going to wind up being bad. RNG is what it is. Then for the rings, it's pretty simple. You just buy Venter's Gambles. You don't have to use Venter's Gamble, but they make it very easy to fix resistances. They do come with rarity, which is cool. And then more importantly, they give you spirit. 19, 20, 18, whatever spirit on each of these, and they're kind of weirdly underpriced for how good they are. And then you can fill in resistances and use like Catalyst to fix whatever resistance you need. Pretty easy to deal with. And then finally, the belt. Darkness Enthroned really is the best belt option for any sort of minion build. It's capable of being socketed as a lot of different items. This is one that I bought that was corrupted because it had this increased maximum energy shield implicit on it. It was surprisingly not expensive. And then as far as the idols, we go Idol of Ralakesh for 8% reservation efficiency of minion skills just to fit in more Spectres. And Idol of Agron so that enemies we curse take 6% increased damage. So now instead of just getting lower elemental resistances on enemies out of Valley Weakness, we're also getting like 11% more damage for everything, all of our physical monsters too. And then I guess, it's worth mentioning that for our Scepter, you do want to use a Primate Idol. These are kind of expensive, 30% increased damage for allies in your presence. There are some other cheaper options, but this is definitely the best one. And then the rest of your gear is just like, some Spirit and Energy Shield and resistances and stats. Level of minion skills, energy shield, stats, stats, move speed, stats, resistances, just anything you can do to get your energy shield up is good, as long as you have enough stats to equip all of your gems, and enough resistances to not die. That's pretty much it. So Lavinia's Spirits is a unique mana flask. The way it works is really awesome. It just applies its effect passively and constantly. It does have a pretty big penalty to the amount of mana that it restores. At 70% reduced amount recovered, that's still like a pretty big amount of mana coming back in. It's something like 40, 50 mana coming back in per second, which is pretty good for a lot of builds. It's able to just trivialize mana entirely, and it is kind of expensive with perfect rolls, and there's a reason for that. It's really awesome. Then the only remaining thing really to talk about with this build is just the jewels, and basically what we're looking for is just like max energy shield, crit damage and crit bonus for our minions, max energy shield, crit damage and crit bonus for our minions, and max energy shield, crit damage and crit bonus for our minions. If we can get energy shield recharge rate or faster start of energy shield recharge, that's good too. Right now we're at 5k energy shield per second and 1.28 for our recharge delay. We could play around with some other stuff and bring those numbers up even further, but we're pretty happy with where we are right now. Like, this build's been very tanky. It destroys bosses. It clears very nicely. It's felt really good to play. And yeah, a bit of a break from our usual type of build, but ultimately we really, really enjoyed it. All right, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and finally thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us and help us make more PoE content, consider becoming a channel member as well. And don't forget to check out the Twitch channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.